welcome. My name is Evan Rutter. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Alumni and Parent Engagement at Claremont McKenna College, and thrilled to have all of you here to listen to one of our very own, in so many ways, both one of our lecturers at the college, but also the class of 1980 alumnus. So wherever you are, I hope you're safe, I hope you're healthy, I hope your family are doing well, whether they're with you or they're elsewhere. I know this is a trying time for everyone. The college has come together with help from alumni and faculty and staff to provide engagement activities for you to learn, to grow, and to help. Most importantly, to create a sense of strong community within Claremont McKenna College, whether you're a student, alumnus, alumna, or a parent, faculty, or staff. I do encourage you to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Our Instagram handle is @CMC Alumni and Families. And then the Facebook page is the private CMC community. You can follow and you can engage that way as well. A few quick things about Zoom. I suggest putting it on speaker view, which is on the top right. You can do gallery view or speaker view. Speaker will send it right to the person asking. So you'll see me right now and pretty soon Gary, and then whomever asks a question later on. I also suggest you keep yourself muted unless we call on you for a question. That way we don't hear the dogs or the pots and pans being washed in the background. We'll of course give time for questions and we'll unmute you when that happens. There is a chat feature, which you'll find at the bottom. When you click that little chat icon, it'll pop up to the right. You can enter your name and your class year or your parent year there just to say a quick hello. When we do the Q&A portion, you can also either virtually raise your hand, which is at the bottom of the participants bar, or you could just enter the question into the chat feature and I'll follow up with you that way. Today, we're thrilled to have Gary Birkenbeuel, CMC class of 1980. He should be presenting at Alumni Weekend tomorrow, but we unfortunately had to postpone Alumni Weekend until October for obvious reasons. Gary's one of our lecturers in the economics department at CMC. Gary retired from Ernst & Young in 2017 and currently serves on two boards. One is the board of the American Film Institute and also a company in Pasadena called Tetra Tech. Today, Gary will be speaking on financial health and investing, especially in today's current economic climate. And as I mentioned, for the Q&A portion, you can either enter your question in the chat feature and I'll call on you, or we can virtually raise your hand and I can see the hand raised in my participation area. And at the end, we'll unmute everyone. We can all come together and say hello and enjoy each other's company. So without further ado, Gary, I hand it off to you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This was a brainchild of the Alumni Reunion Weekend, and I wish we were all together, especially those who would have been participating in the weekend. I am going to use a set of PowerPoint slides that I'll just refer to, and I'll go through those in just a sec. But I would say, whatever I say here, I am not a professional personal financial counselor, nor am I a tax person. I am just a person who was an auditor in my career at EY. And so anything I say hopefully is something that resonates a little bit with you, but if there's something more particular, you really ought to use your own professional about some of this stuff. I thought I'd go through a few things, and I'm going to share the screen here. Let's see if I can get there. There we go. And so I thought I'd share a few things with you all today. And my background's here. I've been teaching part-time, very part-time at CMC since 2016. I spent my entire career with Ernst & Young from Claremont. I can't believe that, but I was at one place my entire career, had a number of different responsibilities there, and now I'm semi-retired teaching at CMC and on a couple of boards and really enjoying all that. Here's what I plan to talk about today. I'm going to give you a little update on a course that I'm teaching at CMC, and it's really an exciting course, kind of dovetails with this.
Hey, Gary, I don't mean to interrupt, but if you want to hit resume slideshow, then it'll go to a full screen in there. Sorry about that.
Okay, bear with me. There we go. Technology is not my strong suit. But anyway, I was going to just quickly go through this course that I'm teaching at CMC. It's really interesting, I think, and the students are enjoying it. Talk a little bit about the CARES Act, mostly speak about those things that affect individuals and not all the other aspects of it. Talk a bit about the importance of emergency funds, managing your investments, financial planning, taxes, Social Security, and estate planning. I've been told by the CMC professionals that many of the folks on the call are getting a little closer to that period of time when they might be thinking about retirement, that it's a little bit of a baby boomer kind of crowd. So if some of this stuff is not that interesting, you can just sleep. So for the first time ever, the college has allowed us to teach a half-credit course in personal finance. So this is not something that ever has been offered at CMC, and to my knowledge, in any of the other 5 colleges as well. And so it is a pass-fail course. It's open to all the students. Any student can take it. We're oversold. There are probably 30 people in this course, and it's set up for 20. We had to move to a different arena, a different room to handle all the kids. And these are some of the things that we really just talk about as a group. A lot of personal budgeting for the kids so they can understand what it's going to be like when they graduate and are out there in the real world. The importance of emergency funds, and I'll hit that a little more later. We talk a lot about dealing with debt, and it's probably one of the bigger changes from when at least I was going to school to now. Student debt is incredibly prevalent. Probably, I would say 80% of the kids in my class have some sort of student debt. Whereas when we were all going to school, or when I was, it wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is today. Credit cards, loan debt, what a credit score means and how that's calculated. I have the kids do a tax return so that they at least can navigate themselves through a pretty simple tax return. We talk all about insurance, life insurance, primarily health insurance, car insurance, things like that. And then we get into investing, and probably the single biggest asset that the young people have is the power of compounding. And if they start early, they can really grow their assets. And I try to help them understand that 40 to 50 year horizon that they have is a real benefit to them. We go through buying a car, leasing a car, talk all the way through all these different types of investments, what it means to buy a stock or a bond or an ETF or mutual fund. We even talk about buying real estate and things like that. We just spent a very interesting session on planning for elder care. I don't know about you all, but it is something that I think our generation just wasn't really that prepared for. And as people are living longer, caring for your elders is something you got to talk about, you got to plan for. And then this is the one where they all fall asleep when we talk about retirement and estate planning. But I felt it was important to touch on it. So the students really have loved it, and I'm very grateful to Diana Graves, the Dean of Students, who's sort of sponsored this. She's really been a champ. And let me just say, I should have said on the get-go, I've planned this for about 40 minutes with about 20 minutes of questions. But if there are questions throughout, and you all want to help me navigate through those questions, I'm happy to stop at any time and take some questions, however you guys want to handle that. So the CARES Act, that's something we're all reading about every single day. I'm only going to hit some highlights of this that may or may not be pertinent to some of you. So one of the things, the required minimum distributions that you have to take at 72 and a half years old, they've been suspended for this year. So that if you're that age and you don't want to take anything out of your retirement account, you don't have to. And if you did take money out before all of this came about, you can put that money back with no penalty. So that was, I think, one of the real benefits of this for those who are in that situation. Small businesses and non-for-profits, as you know, have been applying for this PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. And it's been a good program to allow small businesses to keep their employees. I think it's got all those logistical challenges that government programs have. And I understand that Congress is in the middle of adding to this another $4+ million. So we'll see how this shakes out. You've all heard if you earn $75,000 or less adjusted gross income as a single filer or 150 grand less as a married filer, you can get this $1,200 payment and $500 for every child who's a qualifying child. And that, I think, is helping a lot of people through some tough times. Student relief program, all those loans have been suspended through September. So that people who do have those loans don't have to make those payments, and the interest on those are not being accrued during that time. Tax relief, you've all heard that we don't have to file our taxes until July 15th, our federals. Most every state has followed suit with that, but I would recommend you check with your own state where you live that make sure that they're doing that. For students who get a income from an employer, they don't have to pay their income tax, their employer tax during this period of time. And that's been a really great benefit for them. Unemployment benefits really expanded. Even independent contractors and our gig employee economy, people can get that, and it is, at least in California, up to $600 a week, and the number of weeks has been expanded from 26 to 39. Renters and homeowners, they've gotten relief on foreclosure, and so during I think a 4-month period of time, those foreclosures have been put on hold for folks, and hopefully that helps people out also with their monthly cash flow. A lot of different ways that the government is trying to help people who have been, seriously impacted by this. Some of this is a little repetitive. I guess I would say right now we don't have to pay if you pay quarterly taxes, you don't have to pay your April payment or your June payment until July 15th. And that's a pretty good benefit. And the other thing is, if you are expecting a refund, hopefully you filed as fast as you could and you got your refund, or it's in process. So I would say if you're getting a tax refund, you definitely don't want to wait. You want to file that thing as fast as you possibly can. So one other item from a charitable giving standpoint, I thought this was an interesting aspect of this. Most of the time, charitable giving has a ceiling where it is can only go up to I think it's 30 or 40% of your salary or your income, but now that's been waived, and you can deduct a charitable donation if you are in that situation up to 100% of your adjusted gross income. And if you don't itemize your deductions, your charitable deduction becomes a credit and not just a deduction. So it goes up above the line. So there's some real opportunities to continue to give if you are in that enviable situation. I'll turn to emergency funds. And we talk about this a lot in our class, but this crisis has really underscored the importance of, like anything else, cash is absolutely king. And yet you find in the American population, well less than 50% population has an emergency fund. And you're seeing that at the lowest levels where people are living on the edge. Now they've lost their jobs and they are really hurting in a big way. And yet, when you think about it, it can be such an easy thing to do. So let me just walk through a couple steps to kind of maybe refresh everybody's memory. The first thing you've got to do is you got to say you're going to do it, right? You got to decide to do it. And then if you're in that situation to do it, normally people would say a 3-month salary kind of emergency fund, but now in a period of crisis, you might want to consider more. If you have more dependents at home, if your children have moved home, you may want to have more like a 4, 5, 6-month kind of fund there for an emergency. But you have to understand your balance sheet, your own personal balance sheet. What do you owe? What are all the debts that you have? You then have to take a look at your monthly income statement and what's the income you have coming in versus what are your expenditures. And we even have done this in our household when this crisis started. We really looked at our discretionary expenditures and have done everything we possibly can to reduce those. So the car washes, certainly, as you can tell, the hair appointments, we can't go to the barber anymore. The gyms that we were paying $50-$60 a month to go to the gym, and you can't do it. So we just cut those out. And the more you can reduce your expenditures, the more you can earmark that money towards an emergency fund. Your credit cards. So many of the credit cards and other lenders are working with you right now. Just a couple of examples. Most of the auto insurance companies are giving a rebate for a couple of months on auto insurance. I lease a car, and my car company said that I don't need to make a couple months payments on my lease if I don't have to. And so there's a lot of ways that your creditors will, I think, work with you through all this. Monitoring your investments, absolutely critical. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, so I might hold on that one. Where you can convert your investments to cash, if you need the cash and still preserve their value, I'd say do it. Why not? Because you don't know how long this thing's going to last. And the age-old adage with this is discipline and making sure that you pay yourself first. And so taking that $50 a month out of your paycheck first for savings, for emergency funds, is really one of the keys. And that's one of the things I'm trying to instill in the younger folks in this class that I'm putting on right now. And then the last thing, is kind of take a breath. Don't panic. This is going to pass, and we will get to the backside of this. So don't do anything rash. I would urge everyone, not to do anything rash from a financial standpoint. So those are just a few tips. Managing your investments. This is the age-old challenge that we have, and whether you're 60 or 70 or 25, the time value that you have versus versus the asset pools that you have today are the two real tricky challenges. And you know, not selling in a down market is something that I think everyone should really try to adhere to. When you look at this, one of the things that you see over a 20-year performance of the markets is, for the most part, muni bonds and other types of bonds are pretty steady eddy. You know, they may be a 3 to 5% sort of interest rate or dividend, and you're going to see the stock market be volatile, right? It's going to be up and down and up and down. Right now, we're in a period of time where the stock market's down, and yet most of the bond markets are doing better. And you can see in that circular area here, that's where sometimes people need money or they panic and they sell in a down market, and that's not a good thing. Generally, if you can, and I'm the last person to give investment advice, but generally, if you can, you want to do things like this. So when the stock market's high and the bond market is lower than the stock market, you want to recalibrate and sell some stocks and maybe redistribute your portfolio. When the market's down in that second dotted box, you might want to sell some bonds and take advantage of some opportunity to rebalance and buy some stocks when they're lower. As odd as that might sound, there are some good opportunities out there right now. Generally, what the pros will tell you is sort of a 60-40 stock to bond balance. That depends on a lot of different things: your risk tolerance, your age, how often and how quickly you're going to need your cash. But you can see after 2019, we probably all got a little bit out of whack with our balance there, and our stocks were probably dominating our portfolio because the market went up so much. And so I think the market's recalibrated for us now, but if you're still out of balance, it's not a bad time to rebalance, and it's just a good, healthy thing to be thinking about all the time. Global equities, I know that they have not performed well in the last 3 to 5 years, but I would say overall, we do have to remember that the U.S. economy is really only about 25% of the global economy. And it is very important, I think, to have some portions of your investment portfolio in some kind of global securities, even if that's a mutual fund or an ETF. It just helps with that whole balance. This is just a sample of what a balanced portfolio might look like. Please don't take this to the bank whatsoever, but for kicks. Here's another one. You know, if you want to look at it a little more simplistically, you could look at it this way as well. So a lot of people will ask, you know, if I'm holding cash, should I invest it all the way right now because the market is down? When is the market going to hit its bottom? Should I try to time the market and hit it when it gets to the bottom? Well, if you can time the market and you're really good at that, then more power to you. I would say that it is, from my perspective, impossible to try to time the market. And so I'm much more of a believer of a steady investment portfolio, reallocating, dollar costing, allocating. If you do have some investments that have gone down and you can buy low now to get that total purchase price lower, that's I think a very smart thing if you can do it. But trying to time the market in my opinion, is somewhat of a losing game. And it could be very dangerous as well, because you never know when you're going to need the cash. Again, this is just another slide on risk tolerance and what yours might be. I've also been a big advocate of making sure that you're doing some tax efficient investing, because that age-old adage, it's not really what you make, it's what you keep. And so a little bit of my portfolio is in some tax efficient investments. And I would encourage all of you to think about that as well. Okay, enough of trying to play Charles Schwab. I'd spend a little bit of time, again, because of what I've been told the demographics of the audience are, on some issues related to retirement. I'm getting closer to retirement. I am semi-retired myself, so things do change. And for your spouse, if you are married, they don't always marry you for lunch. They marry you for better or worse, but you're home a lot more. So here's a couple things to think about. And here is something that I found out of the Financial World magazine. Some of the worst mistakes we make when we're entering retirement is not changing our lifestyle. It does change, there's no question, particularly from a financial. Maybe failing to move to a little bit more conservative investment mix because you might need that cash. I think really thinking through the decision of applying for Social Security, too early, too late. I'm going to have a few slides on that in a bit. Spending too much money too soon, getting that Mercedes-Benz and taking those three $30,000 vacations in the first year of your retirement. A lot of people think you're only going to be retired for 15 years, but the average retirement these days is anywhere between 16 and 30 years long. So I'd say don't blow it all too early. Being aware, especially in today's social media environment, so many frauds and scams are out there. You really have to be aware of it because they're out to get your dough. I think cashing out of your retirement plans too early can be a real challenge for folks. Not doing efficient tax planning and thinking through those years is a problem. Here's one that I'm guilty of: supporting my adult working children. I don't always adhere to this. I think you can get sucked in by your children who want to get their retirement money before or their estate before you pass away. Sometimes some folks, particularly here in Southern California, we're really house rich but cash poor, and it can be a challenge, from a cash standpoint. So having that McMansion, can really be a challenge for folks. And I think this is so important. The last one, it has been for me, staying physically fit, staying socially active, having friends and things to do is really an important thing to be thinking about as you're entering into retirement years. So this is kind of fun. These are cities. This is where the low score wins. It's like golf, where these are some of the cities around the country, just a smattering, where the cost of living is lower or higher, depending on where you might live. And some of these cities might resonate with you. Some of this is because of taxes. You can see New York City, 1.78. Really almost double what it is in Denver, Colorado. And so it really does matter oftentimes where you decide to retire. This is a slide that'll tell you the 10 best and 10 worst, and this is from 2018, so it changes all the time. But you can see some of the worst ones are the high tax and high cost of living type of places. And California is right in there as one of the places financially to live. So this is kind of an interesting slide. We all think about how much of my retirement savings should I take out, and how long will that big pot of gold last? And you can see here that if you are in that traditional 5% withdrawal rate, and you are only making 4 to 5% on your income from that, then you're not in too bad a shape, right? I mean, you could last as long as 40 years. But if you drop down to only making 2%, then that 5% is only going to last you 26 years. And if you're starting to take out in the 9 or 10% range, and you're in the 3 to 5, you can see that that's not maybe going to last you as long as you might think that retirement amount you might need. So this is kind of an interesting slide for all of us who are entering into retirement. Taxes. I'm not going to say too much about this because every person's situation is so different. But here's kind of the facts, just some facts and figures. These are all federal. The top ordinary income rate is 37%. We're still paying 0.9 on Medicare. Capital gains right now today is still at 20%, although California doesn't have a capital gains rate. It's ordinary income for dividends. You can see some of these others. It has been the change in the tax law, the 2017 Act, really has hurt high real estate and tax states, so that second to last bullet, the itemized deductions, the mortgage interest, and the state income taxes are limited to 10,000. So that's not the mortgage interest. I'm sorry, not that one. And so that has hurt folks who live in high tax states. And pretty much none of us pay the AMT anymore. Here's kind of a breakdown of the 2020 rates, and you can see you start married filing joint, at 622 if you're lucky enough to be making that much money. That's where you're paying the highest rates. So, Social Security, what to do with that one? As you know, I'm 62 myself. You can start collecting when you are 62, but you're going to take an 8% decrease every year below your FRA or your full retirement age. And for now, for people like myself, that age is about 67 years old. That's where you get full retirement. You do get some deduction depending on how much you make. If you're still working at that point in time, and it's basically $2 for every dollar you make that's over 45,000, which is not that much. If you wait until you're 70 to start collecting, you aren't faced with that. You get what you get, and that's what you get. And I've talked to a lot of people about Social Security and when to start collecting. And it is such a personal decision. So some people need the money. Some people don't need the money. Some people have themselves wait until they are 70, and yet their spouse who worked, maybe it's beneficial for them to start earlier. So some people have differences between their spouse and themselves in terms of when they start collecting. And I've seen that a lot. Health enters into it as well. If you're not as healthy and you don't think you're going to live a life, that's 90 to 100 years old, you may want to think about starting to collect a little bit sooner than somebody else might think about. But it is a very, very personal decision, and a lot of variables go into that. Here's kind of the full retirement age for different folks, depending on when you were born. Myself, I was born in 1957, so I'll hit that at 66 and a half. I do think that we're going to give the slides to the engagement group, and you guys can have these slides or download them if you. So this is just another way to see what the haircut is, depending on when you start collecting. Probably, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is the slide I was mentioning of the dollar limitations that you get depending on how much you are making and how much your Social Security would be reduced depending on how much you make. I'm going to wrap this up with just a short segment on estate planning, and it looks like we've got a fair number of questions, so we might have time to take a few in just. Why is it important, right? Well, a lot of reasons. The financial ones are to minimize your estate taxes. If you have done really well and you have a combined estate that's over 23 million between you and your spouse, you want to try to minimize those taxes. It also helps to eliminate probate costs. Who wants their estate to get into the hands of the court and lawyers and all those things make cost a lot of money? It does minimize those professional fees. But there's an awful lot of non-financial reasons why you want to make sure that your estate is well delineated. If you still have young children, who's going to be the guardian of those minor children? How is your property going to get distributed? What are your medical directives? What are your burial directives? Things such as that, all go into preparing a will and a power of attorney and all those things. And so it's really critically important to think this through. Certainly while you still have all your faculties, right? Who wants to do this when they are failing? Just some facts and figures. This all sunsets under the TCGA in 2025, but right now the top estate rate is 40%, 11.5 million per person. And that's why I said 23 million if you're married. You can have a gift exclusion per child, and it's actually not just children, it's any person. You can give $15,000 a year as a way to decrease your estate that's non-taxable to the person and to you if you give a gift to that person. So if you wanted to and you had the ability to give as much as $30,000 combined to each one of your children or grandchildren or things like that, that is something that you certainly could do. Most estates look like something like this, right? You got your real estate, your life insurance, all your after-tax investments, your IRAs and pensions and those things all go into what make up your estate. And for most of us, our estate's going to go to our surviving spouse, or if you're not married, they're going to go straight to the person that you designate. Sometimes you can set up a trust, and there's complexities with those trusts, credit shelter, marital trust, there's other types of trusts. I'm not going to get into those because they are probably a little too complicated for this session. I think I'm going to skip this one, but just in the purposes of. So when and how often should you review your will and your estate? I would say when you have a big life event, you should review it. A marriage, a divorce, a birth, a death, grandchild birth, your children have children. Those types of events require you to relook at your estate. If you relocate to another place, you should look at that because different states have different laws. Law changes. This TCGA in 2017 had some massive changes to how wills and estates were set forward. And then, if nothing else, I check it every 5 years just to do it because I think that's a healthy thing to do. You may not change anything, but it is a really healthy thing to do. Okay, that gets me through my kind of prepared remarks. I hope I didn't hear any snoring going on, so I hope people are still awake. And I'm very happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
All right, thank you, Gary. Gary, if you'd stop sharing your screen for me, then we can get to our chat group. We do have a number of questions. We have Mark Schwartz, Art Dodd, and Norm Jones. So what I will do right now is start with Norm Jones, who was the first one to raise his hand earlier. Norm, you're unmuted if you want to ask your question. Norm. Okay, we'll move on to Mark Schwartz then. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. My question is, are there any changes to the federal AMT, alternative minimum tax rules, as a result of CARES or other recent federal legislation?
Mark, it's a good question. I don't believe that the AMT rules changed with CARES. I have not read word for word CARES, but I don't believe there's been any changes to AMT. Now, the TCGA, as you I'm sure know, that changed a lot, the AMT rules. So most individuals, not all, but most individuals are not going to have to worry about AMT anymore. I know before the TCGA, I used to be in AMT, and I had to pay extra in taxes every year because of that. And ever since the AMT, I have not had to worry. It's only been 2 years, 2018 and 19, but I haven't had to worry about AMT. I don't think CARES Act did anything to it, to my knowledge.
All right, next up we have Art Dodd. Art, I'm unmuting you if you want to ask your question. And a reminder to everyone else to either raise their hand to participate or put something in the chat feature. Jane, you'll be next.
Hey, Gary, good to see you. So a shout out to our 1980 classmates. Not yet 62 myself, but my question, if you have any insider opinions regarding the hits to state and local budgets, is there going to be great debate over what is essential here in the early 21st century? Or will they just kind of be like they've done in past, financial crunches? It's furloughs and layoffs, et cetera.
Boy, that's a big question. I would say, first of all, they're going to be super hurting, just like individuals are hurting. And here in Southern California, we read every day, whether it's a city or a county or the state of California, just how hurting they are going to be. My guess is that there will be a dramatic decrease in services. So many of the services that we get today, those are going to be cut back in a big way. So just those basic things, the trash, the cleaning up the city pipes, all those things, there's just not going to be nearly as many things. They're not going to have the ability to do it. So yeah, if you have a problem and you're expecting your local city person to come fix it, I think you're going to have to wait an awfully long time. And yes, there'll be furloughs. So whatever the employment roles were, they will be a lot less. And particularly here in California, what this is going to crystallize is the shortfall that we have in pensions. And it's going to really be a challenge because those pension funds are really being impacted because of the stock market going down. So the unfunded pension liability that we face here in California, both with state employees and as well teachers, is going to be gigantic and probably take a lot of years to get back to where we were at the end of 2019. So I would suspect some pretty big changes on the government front, mostly from a service standpoint. You know, when that happens, what you tend to see as well is governments want to raise taxes, right? Because they need the money. So sales tax initiatives, bonds, all those things. My guesstimate is come the next ballot time, we're going to see a lot of things on the ballot to try to raise money. And don't forget the public school systems as well in all that. You were talking mostly about municipalities, but the school systems are going to be radically impacted. So, and not least of which the Cal State and UC system here in California, they're going to have major shortfalls. So we'll see where that takes us, but I think it's going to be a long time before we get back to where we once were from a financial standpoint.
All right, we're moving to Jane Cohen next. Jane, you're unmuted, and then we'll go to Alan Delsman and then John Becker.
Yeah, hey, it's actually Jay Cohen. Jane's making me dinner downstairs. How's that for a trade? Thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it. I was just wondering if you were looking at today's investment environment, if you had to think about a conservative assumption for rate of return on a portfolio, a balanced return, what kind of range do you think we're talking today?
That's a good question, Jay, and you may know more about this than I do, but I would say, you know, last year, CalPERS here in California reduced their estimated assumptions on their rate of return. And I think they reduced it from a long-term rate of 7 to 6 or somewhere in the 6s. You know, if you took out this challenge that we have right now where the market's, you know, dramatically gone down, and whether, you know, it's a hockey stick that it goes back up or some kind of U-shaped oval and it goes back up, it's hard to say, but how long till we get back to you know, close to 30,000 on the Dow, and what might a more realistic average rate of return be? It's anybody's guess, but I would say there's going to be so much pressure coming from so many variables. I think that long-term rate of 6 might be better served to be more in the 4.5, 5 range. That would be my guess.
All right, next we go to Alan Delsman. Alan, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you, Gary? Thanks very much. This was more a comment, as you can see from my video. I am subject to RMDs, and I thought this was a wonderful tax break I got, but my accountant pointed out that there was also a change before this that changed the inheritance part of the RMD from the lifetime of the beneficiary to only 5 years. So his argument was that if you has a sizable IRA or an estate tax problem, you might be better taking it out. Actually, you'd be potentially at a lower rate than your beneficiaries or the estate tax rate. So it ended up not being such a wonderful idea in my situation.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, Alan, and I think it is something you should consult with your professional on. But the Secure Act, which was voted and put into law in December of 2019, did raise the age that you have to take your RMDs, and so that was raised from 70 and a half to 72 and a half. The offset to that is that for those beneficiaries, if the individual was to pass away, they now have a finite life of when they have to take that those monies, and I think that life was over a 10-year period of time. So there were some trade-offs. I'm not 100% an expert in those rules, but I still think that there's some good planning to do, even for someone like yourself. And I would encourage you to talk to the right people to make those good decisions for yourself and your family.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yep.
And next up, we have John Becker. John, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
So a statement and then a question, Gary. I work for Cisco, the food distribution guys, and just to give you an understanding of how profound this is, our sales are down 60 to 70%. So all we do is provision restaurants, institutions that have cafeterias and things like that. And it's profound in terms of the shock it is on our markets. So that gives you an idea of how bad things are. We're working on modeling the rebound. But Gary, for a question for you is, in your circles, are you seeing talk of a complete restructuring of, at least at the federal level, income tax and other taxes, given the impact of the jobs and what was it, the Jobs Act of 2017, basically to address the massive deficits that we were already seeing build up, but also that are going to be compounded now by all these relief acts? And if so, when do you see those taking effect?
Yeah, good question. That's a real crystal ball. I would say, you know, I am not a political scientist, but I don't think anything will happen before the November elections. The only thing that would happen would be some of these short-term relief type of situations that Congress is passing. It's just politically, nothing is going to go on until we figure out who our next president is going to be and figure out what the complexion of the Congress is going to be. And so generally, if you're in either your new term, let's say Joe Biden wins, they try to get something done in the first 2 years of their administration. So if there were some big tax changes, and if there were, I would say those would be a little bit more Robin Hood type tax changes, where there'd be higher taxes for wealthier folks and lower taxes or no big tax change for middle level folks. And if it is President Trump who gets reelected, my guess is that there may be something going on, but then more likely than not, you know, Congress is going to be tough for Congress to work with President Trump unless it's a Republican Republican dominated or majority in both the House and the Senate. Then they might be able to get something done. That'd be my guess.
That was so well nuanced.
All right, next up we have Rick Tebay. Rick, you're unmuted if you'd like to ask your question. Rick, your microphone's off too, maybe.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I was just going to say, if you look at the state budget, about 56% of the state's budget goes to K through 12 community colleges, the UCs and states. So in the last recession, when the state budget went from 139 billion to 80 billion. That was a same percentage cut in education. So I would anticipate the same going forward.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's going to be all kinds of changes also. I mean, think about classroom sizes. Are parents going to be willing to send their children to a place where there's 300 in a class, all sitting, you know, a foot away from each other? There's a flip side to that though as well. Will finally online learning take hold? And online learning is more cost effective than in the classroom learning. And so I think, you know, everyone's going to have to think out of the box, but learning itself is going to be greatly impacted by this, and I do think there's going to be a lot of pressure on all these school districts, K through 12, higher education, all kinds of things that we're all going to have to face.
All right, we have time for one last question. If anybody wants to either put it in the chat box or raise their hand. I know it's dinner time on the East Coast. So we'll do kind of one last call. We have about 30 seconds left. All right, we'll see. Cammie says she's very happy that the kids are getting personal finance, our students. So Gary, thanks for working at our alma mater. It's very much appreciated. We're very glad they have your expertise. Just so everyone knows, we did record this. We will post this online with our other virtual talks that have happened over the last couple of weeks. This Friday, we have Professors Cameron Shelton and Manfred Kyle talking about consumer confidence and their work with the Lowe Institute of Political Economy. So I encourage you to join us on Friday as well. Otherwise, I'm going to unmute everyone. You can all say a hello to Gary, a big thank you, whatever you want. Everyone's unmuted. Everybody be safe
Thank
and
you.
healthy.
Thank you, Gary.
I appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you.
1980.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent
Gary,
presentation.
bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gary. Hi, Melinda. My name is Ivana, and I got your... Oh, shit.
Arrivederci.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Hi, Melinda. Thanks, Gary.
Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
There were a lot of people on.
Gary, you had 175 at the high point, and you averaged, I think, about 170 total.
Wow.
You're a popular guy, Gary.
Yes.
Oh, man. Mitch, you're looking good, Mitch.
You too. Good to see you.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Hey, take care of yourself, huh?
You too. Joe, you made it. Zoom, you did it.
With your help, my friend.
Yeah, let's see. Jenna, do you need me to send you these slides?
Yeah, if you want to send those over in an email whenever you get a chance, I'll make sure that they get sent to the team that's getting everything up for us.
Okay. Well, that was really great. It worked out very well. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm very appreciative.
Yeah. All right. I'm going
Good
to.
work, Gary.
Yeah. Thank you, Evan. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to sign off.
Yeah, well, consider Gary, October 9th or 10th is your new alumni weekend. So if you want to do something then for the group in person, you're welcome to.
I would love to, just because I think the alums appreciate the fact that we're holding this personal finance class, and it really is adding a lot of value, I think, to the kids. And it's something new. So I'm happy to do it. I'd be pleased to do it.
Great.
Okay. All
Okay,
right.
then I'm going to
Bye,
end this
Gary.
meeting, and we
Bye,
will see
everyone. Bye,
everyone.
Edna. Bye, Joel.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye, Evan. Thank you.